Pearl Harbor, it's an A-plus military operation. They sink everything. Of course, it's shallow water, and we raise most of it afterwards. They lose nothing. I mean, boy, how can you do a more perfectly choreographed military operation than that one, except it turns an absolutely isolationist country into one hell-bent coming after Japan, and that would be called a strategic disaster. So you got to be cautious about your military actions and think about what are the strategic consequences, and it's very difficult to gauge those accurately.
The sort of like delusional optimism of the Japanese to think that they could beat America, how much of that is motivated by the idea that they actually do think they're led by a living deity? Like, is that related to why they thought they could win?
No, but you're looking at the United States as isolationist. If you're Japanese and you're looking at these absolutely isolationist Americans, right, who are letting Britain, their closest ally, potentially go down to Nazis, right? They're about losing everything, and we're not doing anything. And so they're looking at it isolationist. Well, won't the answer be the isolationists go, "Ooh, this is expensive, let's get out of here"? And of course, that's not understanding Americans. I remember I was in seminar the day that 9/11 happened, and the TV, there was TV in the seminar rooms, and there was a break, and after the end of the break, the students had the TV on and were watching Tower 1 had gone down, and then while we're in seminar, the next one we're watching, it goes down, and I thought, oh my, there's going to be hell to pay for this one. Because this is how Americans are, that if you mess with us, boy, does it get ugly. And this is like, don't think, retaliate. Ugh. So the Japanese didn't understand that part of us. In fact, a lot of people don't. They look at Americans, we look like a bunch of hedonists. But if you mess with us, it's ugly.
One of the things I learned from your book is the overwhelming fraction of deaths on the Japanese side during the war happened after it was known that they were going to lose. I think in the last 14 months, and this is all from your book, at 1.8 million of the total 2.1 million Japanese deaths, that's 85% of the total happened in the last 14 months of the war. And a similar thing is true with Germany, where I think 43% of the deaths happened in the last year of the war. I think like 2.3 million out of the 5.3 million. Walk me through what is going on inside government when the higher level people must know that they're losing, but they're going to make bigger and bigger sacrifices.
You're conflating, I think, Western values about what the purpose of the government is. Well, in commonwealth, commonweal is common good. And this notion that governments are about the well-being of individuals. Okay, well, we're not in societies where we're talking about individuals for openers. Certainly not in Japan. Then there's another, well, why the deaths so huge? It's at the end of these wars, you've broken the transportation system that gets produce to hungry mouths, and you've also removed so much manpower, literally from the fields. You aren't producing anything, so that you're talking about mass starvation as the result of having done a number of previous years of warfare. And also this mass starvation helps account for why one side gets shattered and quits. And then the thing that ought to give everyone pause is, okay, if Japan's economy was, I don't know, a tenth of ours in World War II, and these are the kind of costs that they could inflict, watch it on getting into wars with countries that you think you're vastly superior to. It may not work out. The costs are horrific. I mean, you're illustrating the problems with this continental order of taking territories. This is how it goes. But sometimes other people visit wars on you, and then you're into their world of hurt. I mean, I think it's like Angela Merkel or Neville Chamberlain back in World War II, who's going, surely these people don't want to do this. It's going to wind up being a bloodbath. Surely they don't want to. So Neville Chamberlain makes the compromise at Munich, thinking, surely this will be it. We'll compromise them, they'll go. Wrong. They're going to come in for the whole thing.
So there's a couple of options, and maybe the correct answer isn't one of these, but one is that there's just denialism of they genuinely do not understand that they are going to lose the war. Another is that, look, they know they're going to lose, but it's better to, like, they would prefer to just go out dying.
Well, they're dead anyway, so who cares? Right? Well, this is the problem with nuclear weapons. Push someone into a large corner or a tight enough corner. Maybe they think that, well, it's my last day, so guess what? It's going to be your last day too.
How much should we question the demand for unconditional surrender, knowing that most of the deaths in World War II happened because, look, if there wasn't a unconditional surrender, maybe we could reach a peace earlier. Most of the deaths could have been spared.
Oh, I think by the time those deaths are Japanese deaths for us. We're looking at these things and we've lost a lot of people. And our idea is, hey, we're almost there. And we're not worried about Japanese civilian deaths or Japanese military deaths. We're looking at these are the people that have killed how many Chinese? And I don't believe China was ever part of Japan. What were they doing there? So then you're asking for tender mercies out of Americans for the Japanese in those days? No.